All right. So, my name is Shay Topham. I'm a communications director at Rights and Democracy. My pronouns are he and him. So as Colin alluded earlier this morning, I actually grew up in the Northeast Kingdom. I currently live in Burlington, but as some in this room know, Bennington has a very special place for me. I spent 5 very formative years here, attending Bennington College. So from like 17, so like, you know, started in 86, I finally graduated in 91. Being a poor kid from the kingdom, I worked pretty much full time to help pay my tuition to get through Bennington. So I worked a lot in restaurants in North Bennington, Bennington and Manchester. I worked at Friendly's, I worked at Percy's, if everybody was around back then, way back when in North Bennington, and I worked up a bunch of restaurants up in Manchester at night. So I got married at Park McCullough House in North Bennington, so it's like any chance to come back to Bennington and be with Bennington people is always a good time, especially when we have alum in the room too. It's always good to do that. So anyway, that's not why I'm here, but it is why I'm here. Because that's part of my story, it's part of sort of like my connection sort of doing this work and having grown up and lived in Vermont, is trying to sort of help figure out how do we talk about the things that are really important to these small communities. I mean, I grew up in like small farming towns of like 400 people, Trump country in Vermont. People forget, like we think about Vermont as this progressive, you know, bastion of everything. We know it's not. I know it's not, you know, because I grew up where it is, and it's still Trump country. You know, I go home, you know, to go visit friends, and it's like, it's still there, right? So it hasn't left anywhere, right? So that's part of like, but how do we do the work that we're gonna do, and how do we connect with the people we wanna connect with? And I think what we're gonna talk about over this stretch, and I had a little piece as a homework for you, to kind of help, at least if you didn't do it, it's fine, but at least if you should have looked at it, we're gonna workshop some of this stuff. We've got time to do that today, to kind of work through some of this stuff. So all the things that sort of Colin and Kirsha talked about this morning, the sort of the how we sort of got here, the sort of like where we've come from as a country, as people, right, as human beings, sort of, and what we want to have, right? And what we want to have is the reflection of what we value. How are we going to communicate that through our campaign? How are we going to communicate that to the people around us? And how are we going to move things in a direction back to what we've been sliding away from like 40 to 50 years, right? No small feat. We won't solve it all today, but we're going to start, I think, in really kind of understanding, like just how do we make those sort of, because what I heard a lot of, when you talked about your values, like the things you want to do, I heard words like reconnecting, community, trust, safety, thriving, right? Relationships, right? A lot of this stuff happens through how we tell our story, right? So I've done a lot of work. I've been a journalist, I've done marketing, you know, for books and other things. So I've done a lot of work on communications. And communications, to me, boils down to 2 very simple things. Listening, right? And telling stories, right? But in order to communicate effectively, you have to listen first. And this is going to come into effect when you're doing door knocking, like the next session, when you're doing field work. Listening is important because you never know the story on the other side of that door. You might, but you might not, right? And being able to sort of have that story effectively sort of connect the values you're trying to push and move that forward helps to build that relationship, and it also helps to sort of understand where that person's coming from. Because when I heard Emily say this, I feel like it's really true. Understand that all of us have pain, right? All of us have some kind of pain. Some of that pain is shared, right, in some reflection or another. Whether it's been as someone who is part of a group that is oppressive or has been oppressed, right? We're there. So we have that pain. In order to move forward in communicating those values that understand that and move us forward, that's when we sort of make breakthroughs. So we're going to try to work on some of that. And I'm going to go over some stuff briefly because the presentation this morning kind of really cut through it. The Powell memo and some of the stuff that Kirsten worked on really sort of helped to sort of communicate how some of these systems work. But in communication speak, right, when we talk about how we do this, that whole sort of neoliberal effect that we've had, where it's like rugged individualism, you know, it's like very anti-government, free market will solve everything, and like, it's really considered what they call a frame. It's how a worldview is communicated, and it's a set of values that are communicated. Understand this, these are not necessarily policies. These are values, and those values are rooted really in racism and structural oppression. So we have to sort of understand the very basic concept of where all of these things are rooted. Because if we don't, then what we do and the words that we choose as we effectively try to communicate our values, or that we talk about and the issues we fight, we can sometimes basically reinforce these without even knowing it. And that's what our side, like our values, we need to avoid this. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. I can share the slide around, but basically, it was already said this morning, but there's a term that is also the title of a really good book called Dog Whistle Politics by Ian Hanley Lopez. We worked at Demos, and it's one of those most it really kind of opened my mind even more to how really sort of words are rooted in this kind of structural oppression, and how they filter and have infiltrated politics, policy, and basic communication between individuals, right? How it's broken relationships. So, anyway, so we've heard what dog whistle is, I'm not going to go through it, but understand, this is the frame I want you to remember, right? Because it's the one we're going to avoid. And we're going to build a set of value words and concepts that aren't going to be in reaction to this. Because that's the other thing we're talking about. It's not reacting to this. Because by reacting to this, we admit that this is the system that we want, that we have and want. And we're reinforcing it every time we sort of just react to it. So our goal, and we're going to talk about this, is to sort of do some other stuff. We're going to do some word work, and we've got some stuff on the sheets we're going to work through. So why is it understanding this ideological frame necessary? Well, for me, it's because it helps us to understand these myths that are out there. That somehow the truth will set us free, that if we just tell people the facts, since people are, we think, basically rational human beings, they're all going to reach the right conclusions, right? That's actually a myth. That is not true. People do not think rationally when they do this. They reflect and respond to a value set and to emotion, right? It's here, right? This is where you got to connect. Not here. It's got to be here. And this is what the right has done, and the sort of that ideological frame we talked about at the beginning has done so effectively, right? By dividing us around, mostly around race, right? And around oppression, and pitting groups against each other. People will vote against their self-interest. Well, we know that's a myth. We know that's not true, right? And we just talked about this morning why that's it. Political issue-based campaigns are like product-focused marketing campaigns. We just need better slogans, right? I will tell you right now, that's bullshit. It is not sloganeering, and communications and messaging is not slogans. You don't need a better buzzword. You don't need a better campaign slogan, right? You need to be able to tell stories effectively and communicate your values. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna keep saying that word because it's gotta sink in, because we forget, right, that the shared values that we have actually are very powerful when we talk about them on our terms, in our way. So that's what we're gonna really work on. So I just talked a little bit about what frames are, right? So frames are basically these sort of, and George Lakoff talks about this a lot in his book, Don't Think of an Elephant, and then Don't Think of an Elephant. And I worked at Chelsea Green when we put that book out. It was a really fascinating insight for me to sort of helping him kind of get this message out to people. But the thing is that everything that these frames are talked about, how we talk about things, and the ideological ways in which we sort of set our values out there, it helps to shapes everything. It's how our brain sees them, and our brain's wired to hear them in ways that are unintended in some cases, right? So that's why the words that we use, the values we communicate through, we have to be very intentional about what we do. We have to really deeply understand what we're doing, because it's really getting at sort of this unconscious area of our brain that we're trying to sort of really kind of activate different frames that are really something that people that understand and make connection with people value. So really what we're going to be talking about a lot, what you're going to be talking a lot about is reframing, right? So it's really, I will tell you right now, again, it's not ideas, they're ideas, it's not slogans, it's not easy, right? This is work. We saw where we've slid from and where we're headed, right? So none of this is going to be easy, but it's a matter of it's kind of imperative, we've got to be working on this. So in other words, this is the stuff we have to be working on constantly. And this is a big thing for me too, is we think of sort of the way that we message to be all spin and manipulation, because that's sort of like how it's sort of framed. But actually, to me, it's like in order to do it right, reframing, we got to be honest, right? We've got to be trusted, and you want to be trusted because that's what we want to build, right? So if we want to build those relationships and those trust, we're not going to build it basically by spinning people, right, into thinking better, right? That's going to backfire badly. So what we want to do is we want to be doing a couple of things. And the first thing and foremost that we're going to talk about is the next thing, it's the thing we're going to work on, is that in order to argue against sort of the other side, okay, we need to stop using their language, right? I mean, first and foremost, we just got to stop it. And we got to come up with our own. And it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but it's going to be around a shared set of values. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to work on. And this is a good visualization. And understand visual is a way of communicating, right? Think of how we talk about these words, right? When we think about equality, right? So everyone's got the same box. Is that really what we're talking about? No. You know, we're talking about equity, really. And that's what it looks like. But of course, this is the reality that we're up against. So don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate the power of reality against even getting the marginal areas of what we consider equality to where we're trying to get to, which is equity, which is more toward liberation, right? So that's where really kind of we're striving toward that. And don't lose sight of that. Like, if that is your North Star, then you keep that your North Star, right? The other side doesn't have anything to do with your North Star. Your North Star are your values, they're your touchstones, and that's where your story is going, that's where you're bringing people. And that's why it matters, because if you're talking about stuff and it's focused on this, right, you're not reinforcing these things, and you're trying to help people, because people want, right, they want better. They want more, they want something for everyone. How they communicate that might not be necessarily always, they don't always have the words, because they're being pushed into these other buckets on how to speak about things. So we're trying to we got to work around that. So we're talking a little bit about this, but we just sort of, myself and Beth Noel from ACLU, who's their communications director, we're sort of working on this sort of idea of like value words. This is like a kickoff, and we're going to do some brainstorming right here. So like these are ones that we sort of thought of like these are shared value words that we came up with. It might be different for you, it might be different from here. But like equity versus equality, right? So it's like these are like misleading shared values, right? One income household versus like a single mother, right? Because what does a single mother fall into, right? It's like almost pushing toward like welfare queen. It's like you're moving to someone who's an other, who has to be distinguished as someone less than, right? When that is not in fact true. I mean, I was raised by a single mom, so I look at that and go like, well, yeah, single mom, she was awesome. She was my dad too. She was everything, right? So it's like she raised 3 kids on her own, you know. And so I look at that and see it differently. But we know I know what that triggers, right? That's not the trigger for most people. Marginalized versus vulnerable, right? Because marginalized means what? Anyone want to say versus that? I want to say like, when you see those two differences, what do you see as the difference between those two, and why one's misleading and one's a shared value?
One of them's active, the other one's passive.
Okay.
Marginalized is around like systems and structures, put someone there versus vulnerable. They didn't pull themselves up, but it was just.
Right, exactly. It's like, right? They're sort of like, they almost like they had it coming. Like it was just like, you know, it's that whole the rugged individualism part. It's like, it's almost like, well, yeah, they were meant to be pressed, right? Because they were already vulnerable. So, what can we do? You know, which we know that's not exactly what we're doing. So, here's what we're going to do a little, keep that up there. What to do. So, this is what's going. Reflecting on this, what I want to do is I want to talk about like, when you think of words that would fall under like the misleading shared values, or like how sort of the systems that we're sort of working against, how they define us and our work and the issues we're working on, like I want that. So in other words, don't try to message around it. Like I want to hear what you hear, right? So it's like you tell me what are the terms, And they can be the ones that like, you just go, you know what I mean? They can make you go like, that's not how I see myself, right? So I wanna know, like, what's the misleading up there? So like when the other side talks about us in our work, what do you hear? What are the words?
Want everything for nothing.
Free stuff.
Free stuff.
Free stuff, yeah, that's better.
There's no word, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Unpatriotic.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oops.
Lazy.
Easy.
Substance abuse.
Mhm. Selfish. Elite.
We hate America. We hate America. That's
Yeah,
unpatriotic.
patriotic, like you hate that.
Irresponsible.
What else? Uneducated. What are there some epithets they throw out there, like in terms of just
Oh,
like,
like snowflake and stuff.
yeah, snowflake, socialist, communist. I mean, it's like, right? I mean, how? I mean, like, let it out. It's all good. Because we need to name these words in order to know that we don't need to use them, right? And we're going to work on ways next on the words that actually aren't that, and they can't be reflections of, or just the antithesis of. But they're going to work on our stuff. So, go ahead.
Impractical.
Yeah, like snowflake.
Lofty. Lofty.
Lofty.
Idealist.
Idealist.
What is it, Joe?
I think
Communist, yeah, that's a good one.
I missed one. What's the other one?
Idealist.
Idealist. All right.
What was it, Joe?
Right, sort of keeps like the snowflake kind of concept too. It's like,
Yeah, like the trigger warnings.
Yeah, yeah.
Takers.
Takers, yeah.
yeah,
that's
there you
good.
go. Good one. Yep. Bleeding heart. Yep.
Users,
Users.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. So I mean, I don't mind sharing this. My obviously it's on the website, but so I was at a meeting with an overdose coalition, some folks from New York, and we're going around the room talking about like how the opioid crisis has impacted us. You know, I talked about like how I had friends die, you know, from overdosing, and that I had struggled, you know, with addiction, and I said, you know, I was like, I can't remember how many years it was, like maybe 6 years or 5 years at the time, where I was clean and sober. And it was interesting because one of the guys after like came to me and he's like, so we don't use the word clean anymore. He's like, because saying the word clean, it indicates that you were once dirty and none of us are dirty.
Right,
And it was just like, and to me, as someone like who had sort of always thought that was the term you use,
yeah.
right? But now it's not. And it was just like, it was like this, and I gotta tell you, like it was like a weight got lifted.
Oh, yeah.
Because then if you're not thinking of yourself in those terms,
Sure.
right? Like, yeah, I was never dirty. Like, I struggled, you know?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, you know, we still do, but I mean, but I don't. Like, I am still sober. So it's like, but that was like a really important moment to me also in language, right? So like you mentioned that. So it's like, so if you think about that, think about the terms and how people want to be reflected. Think about the burdens you can lift off of them,
Mhm.
right? By the value words that we're going to use, right? Because it does mean something. Because people see themselves and hear themselves in how you speak to them and about them and with them, right? And that's sort of part of it. So We don't need to go too much further with this because, you know, it can be endless. They've had 40 years of fun, and now we're going to try to end it, right? So now we're going to talk about. I want to talk about. This is a fun part. I like talking about more. Really. You've already talked about this a lot. I just mentioned them a bunch because you got to brainstorm this. What are our values? Like, what are ours? What are we trying to communicate?
Community.
Loving support. I know some of you don't think I should use that word, loving, but it's good for me.
Understand?
And you gotta know these
All right,
guys.
peace, love, and understanding. That's good. Right there. I like it. I like it. I like Elvis Costello fans in the room. That's good. Thank you. That's good. That's good.
Belonging.
Belonging. Good. Yeah.
Value, it would have to be, well, it's more, it's like every human is valuable.
Mary, say your favorite one.
Dignity, I know, I was like holding back because I'm like, I always say that one.
Yeah. But it's true. But I mean, yeah. Yeah.
And compassion.
What is it?
Compassion.
Yeah.
Keep going. I'm just going to read some. I was going to make sure. I know there's some. Let me make sure we get up there that you already mentioned, so we can. So what else? What kind of communities do we want to see?
Prosperous.
Yeah.
Inclusive.
Inclusive, yeah.
Inclusive. Yeah.
Diverse.
Thriving. Thank you, ma'am. Which is not
Happy.
happy, yes.
Safe.
Safe is good.
Yeah.
Welcoming.
Well, yeah.
Healthy. In all respects.
Yeah. I'm sure we can keep going, right?
Yeah.
The fact is, like, we have a lot of values that we want to share, right? We have a pretty, I mean, who wouldn't want to live here,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I guess the question is, like, I mean, I know what's stopping us, right? But what is stopping us? From saying this, right? Over and over and over again. Because I'll tell you one thing, like the other side, they've said the same shit over and over again for 40 years until it became fact. Even though, as Colin Slide pointed out, it became like the improbable became possible. Because it was bullshit, it was fringe ideas, right? So when they call you a hippie, socialist, communist, you're like going, fine. Because in 40 years, you're going to be thanking me.
Yeah, right.
For the health care that's going to be taking care of you because we've been fighting for it, right? So, I mean, but the thing is like, this is the thing that always gets me. It's like we always sort of get like, oh, it's like, but like, because, you know, it's like, it's not to say, we can't be sitting there saying like, well, America was already great. Wrong.
Yeah, right.
A, it wasn't, right?
Right.
Right? B, right? It's actually a reflective frame that is like, it just sends the message out and just gives free advertising for whom that dog whistle is meant for.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we're trying to get away from, right? So we're trying to get away, you know, from saying this, right? And responding to it directly. And, you know, as Emily was even saying too, like, and as we've talked about before, like, in order to build that kind of connective relationship and community that you're trying to build, especially if you're running for office, because we know that sometimes more. The campaign is more than just itself, right? It is trying to rebuild some of that community, some of that relationship that's been happening. So in order to do that, we need to sort of help people understand and talk about what that community is, what it can do, the power of it, to do to heal, right? The power to be safe and the things you're going to be fighting for. So that's really, you know, as we sort of talk about developing your platform message, developing your little elevator pitches, like for all the issues, the stuff that Emily was talking about, like your social, your tweets, your Facebook posts, like all of it has to come down, right, to your core set of values, right? These values that you just named, that we can keep going, right? Because we have an endless source of like what our values really are. And we can't live by how we've been framed, right? And how our work has been talked about anymore. Like we can talk about it from just overall oppression for everyone to the impending climate crisis. I mean, you know, it's like, name it, right? You know, and rather than just giving up and like going and living in a yurt somewhere until it all ends, like, you know, if we're gonna stick here and make these communities work, then we need to be, this is the stuff that people want, right? They don't want more of this other, they don't want pain, right? We're kind of done with that. We got enough coming at us. Like, we need some things that are healing. So, when you're working on your platform message, you want to have these values, right, embedded in everything you talk about, right? And you want to lead with values, right? I always tell candidates when they come to me, they talk about like, well, I've got like the best idea for like fixing climate change, and that's the message I'm going on to every door because it connects with everybody. And I'm like going, yeah, that's not how you're going to do it though, right? Because people don't vote here, and I know it's hard. It's because like people vote here. I mean, look where we are as a country. We know people aren't voting here, right? So they will vote against their self-interest because they will vote for someone who reflects, and sometimes they're responding unconsciously to these dog whistles that have been embedded and baked into everything we do, thinking that that's how things work. But what we know also is that we can effectively message. And it's not about sloganeering, it's about just leading with our values, right? Because those dog whistles, they signal a certain set of values. And yes, we know what they're based on, right? It is based on sort of structural oppression and racism that is like, you know, they're coming for me. Like, they're coming for my stuff. Even though that person may not have any stuff. They're still coming for my stuff, right? Because in their minds, they've been made out to believe that they have the stuff, right? Because they look like the person saying it. So what we have to be doing is this. So what I want to do now is you have a worksheet in there. Some of you may have filled it out already. See if I have the...
Is it, which one?
Yeah, let me, grab that. So it is not the elevator pitch exercise.
The lead Vermont training message?
Right, the messaging homework assignment?
Yeah.
So what I want to have you do, just to start, so we're going to take like, we can take, 10 minutes, maybe like 5 minutes we can do it, because it might not be too much for you to do this. So I want to leave time for the elevator pitch, so you want to work on some of those and workshop some of those now before you get into the field stuff, where you're going to be doing even some more like speaking. So, and some of the stuff you can just do, right, later. But for this exercise, what I want you to do is I want you to put down, do the platform message part where it says develop or list like the top 3 issues for you, right? So these are you, like these are the issues that are most important to you, right? And then I want you to think objectively, right? Don't just sort of say like, yes, my community agrees with everything I do. Like, that's not what I want you to do. I want you to think about what are your core values and why you would want to run for office, and what would you fight for, what would you stand for, what would be anchored in the value statements you make. And then I want you to develop a list of the things that are for your community that you think you're facing. They might not be all the same, and that's okay, right? But you need to know where there's overlap, right? But you also need to understand where you're going to have to work those values into other things that people care about, right? So be honest, because that's where it's all going to start from. So take a few minutes just to work on those 3 things for each of those, and then we'll work on the next exercise after that. Who wants to share? Who wants to share a couple? Yeah, you want to go? Which one?
First list first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and do your stuff and then the community stuff? Go ahead and do the.
All right, for the platform message I got, number 1 I put
things that I want is livable wages. The second one is creating jobs, job creation. The third one is housing.
Yeah.
The other list, the community, policing in the community, which I know that people are, want to happen. Well, not want to happen. They don't want it to happen as much as it's going on now, but job security, people want to be able to keep their jobs around here. And also, the big issue, which I think is a big issue, is the gun thing, gun control stuff. Because they feel like Governor Scott trying to take their guns and stuff.
Good.
We have a different perspective on gun control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the whole idea. The
That's
whole
what they
idea.
want, but that's
Exactly.
what they want.
That's
Right.
exactly great.
To talk about. But-
Yep.
Right.
And the the cross-reference was the livable wages and the job security. 'Cause you gotta be able to continue to be on the job in order to pay rent and stuff.
Yeah.
But those, the last three things are what the community,
Yeah, there's a,
I think,
Yeah.
from what I keep hearing.
who wants to share next?
I think a big one in District 2-1 is the environmental justice for PFOA. That's a big one there. So that's actually where something aligns.
Yeah.
That's kind of for both. Big one for me is sort of revitalization of the youth in the area. Vermont kind of has a narrative of youth flight and things like that. So just by thinking about opportunity in entrepreneurship, environmental entrepreneurship, and things like that. And then number 3 is kind of looking at health and wellness, like addiction, support, nutrition. And then so looking at the what the community's looking at, clean water's one, and then there's a narrative of the opioid crisis, economic depression, food insecurity, and then again, second amendment issues.
Yeah.
My platform message and community message, basically the same: climate change, our future economy and jobs, and rural economic development.
You think that district? You're in the.
I'm in Shasta.
You're in Shasta.
Yeah, it's different, yeah.
So, people talk about guns a lot, but
It's not a, yeah.
Yeah. Who else?
I had a lot of the same, but something that was a little different, was for me, paid family leave and affordable childcare. And that is definitely, for in the community, I had economic opportunities, but specifically childcare availability and cost, and everything else might match up. I'm in Bennington.
You're in
I
Bennington.
don't have kids, I'm just like
Yeah.
stressed about it, like I hear people calling me down on wait list before they're even pregnant, so just wait on my mind.
It's just seeping out everywhere. It's just, yeah, great. Who else wants? Anyone else?
I have my issues, not mine issues, the issues I'm passionate about. Would be health, inclusion and dignity of everyone, which includes schools, workplaces, all that stuff. In environmental issues. And I think for our town, I identified the first issue as economic growth, because that's people that I talk to are always talking about. The second issue being having a good image as to inclusion and other things to attract tourists, because that feeds the economy. And the third issue that I do feel is important is water, and that includes the PFOA as well as lead issues, as well as what we do with the Morgan Spring water and all that kind of stuff. So I think that the overlap in my interpretation of the environment, certainly the water issues, et cetera, but there are other issues as well. And in terms of economy, I would argue that that inclusion relative to treating workers with dignity and giving them a livable wage would in fact bolster the economy. So I see that as an overlap, even though I understand that just using general words, it might not be seen as an overlap. And health as well, relative to the economy, I would argue that health is crucial to having a good economy. But I don't know that the public, I don't think they see it that way. So, anyway.
Yeah.
My top three, if I work for a candidate or if I were to run, is criminal justice reform, harm reduction. I'd rather have needle exchanges as opposed to finding needles in the park, and restorative justice. As for the community, though, I think it's business infrastructure, livable wages, and retaining talent, the youth thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I came late into this because I had an emergency, sorry. Everything's good.
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 But basically, everything at this table sounded great, but equity is like the main focus with education, criminal justice, just workers, and that doesn't just mean people of color,
No.
obviously it means all across the board. So that's like all my issues in that thing, but also all voices being heard, real democracy, healthcare, and as far as the community, economic growth, the opioid crisis, and I don't know how they intersect other than if we have equity, maybe some of those other concerns would kind of resolve
Yeah,
themselves.
because
right, so
people are getting what they need in
Right.
terms of healthcare that we wouldn't have, so, yeah.
Good. So this is sort of like, kind of like how Emily sort of like was like mapping out, sort of like people, right? So the same kind, you're doing the same thing here, like, but you're sort of in how she talked about constituency groups, like different people are involved in different things. Like, so the one thing that never changes are your values,
Right.
but the issues you're going to talk about are going to be a little bit different depending on who you're going to talk to. And you want to try to move people, right, into your value, into the frame of your values, where they are, and how what you're bringing, right, helps them too, right? You're trying to liberate it. We're trying to liberate everyone, right? So it's like, it's not like we're just trying to liberate just that person, right? Because like that's the other side. They just like, we just want like this little 1% gets everything, and the rest of you, good luck.
right.
Be rugged individualists and like, buy our products and it'll be okay, right? So we know that's not been the case. But that's where this is all kind of like starts to sort of get more nitty gritty and sort of, because this is the stuff you're going to be doing. Like, it's not all in your head now, right? So now you're starting to put it all on paper, and now you're going to start to write it, and you're going to start to talk to people about it, right? So in order to do that, that's why having this, because, yeah, there are a few people who might, disagree with some of these, but
No.
come on. Happy?
They'd be embarrassed to say they did.
I mean, like, seriously.
Right.
No, seriously.
Like, those become bad words
But the
sometimes.
crazy thing is, the other people, they think that they're giving us that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's right.
That's what they,
That's what,
that
that's,
other page, that's what they're giving us.
Right.
They think,
but that's why when we talk about, that's why it's like sort of like, if we sort of talk about solutions based on the frames that they've already given us, right? They don't fit in there. So it's like, so if we anchor how we talk about the things, the issues that are important to us in our communities, in the value that are anchored in the values we're working on, like it helps to sort of shift the narrative and shift the conversation off of a frame that is, as we saw before, completely rooted in racism and oppression, is really meant to sort of keep us divided and keep us sort of structurally sort of in the system that we're in, and not getting those sort of getting to those breakthrough moments where we are talking about really equity. We really are talking about everyone having a stake in it. So, and real democracy. I mean, to be honest, I mean, like that's something we should remember, right? Like we don't really have that, right? So, well, how do we get through that? So, anyway, so but understand.
Are we gonna role play?
Yeah, we're getting there next.
Okay.
We're getting there. We're getting there next.
Get ready.
Do it.
So here's, all right, so it's 10 after, so what we're gonna do is, what I'm supposed to do is, okay, imagine yourself like, so like you now have like the issues that you're working on, you talked about these value words, thought about this with Emily and the campaign stuff. You talked about some stuff with Con and Kirsten at the beginning. So now you're gonna write yourself a little script for how you're gonna introduce yourself at a door on like who you are, what are your values, right? And sort of how you're trying to sort of, what's it, and just pick one of the issues, right? And challenge yourself. You can pick an issue of like a community issue, right? And how you're gonna bring your values into that community issue.
Wait, so we don't wait and hear what they're interested in first, we just.
Well, you're gonna role play some more of that now, right? Afterwards, so you're gonna be doing that.
Stuff
at
is
the
later.
end.
This is just you practicing talking about yourself.
You need to be.
Who are you, Mary?
You need to be comfortable.
I'm not telling. No.
Because the thing is, it's like if you're not comfortable talking about your values and how they motivate you and how they motivate you on a specific issue, like when you get to the door, you're gonna freeze. Because you're just gonna hear what they say and you're just gonna reflect back what they say. So you need to be rooted in your values first. So we're gonna work on, that's like, you gotta be rooted in this part first. And then when you get to doors in the field and you start role playing more, where you're really gonna have more like maybe confrontation, or like someone's gonna be diametrically opposed, and you're gonna have, that's when you're gonna sort of play around more with these words and kind of maybe do it. But right now, you need to be rooted and I want you to all be clear about who you are and what your values are, right? And how you communicate that to somebody. When you just knock on someone's door, like, you know. So I'm gonna give you like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then I want people to read them out a little bit. We'll try to, so we can get wrapped up, right? So you can get a little break before we get in the field.
Okay.
So go ahead and write a little bit. It's not gonna be perfect right now. Don't worry about it. It's a safe space.
Okay.
Okay? There's no judgment. We're just working this through. So go ahead. You respond is what people, and then anybody working with you or for you or in on your campaign, they all have the same thing that I was talking about. Everyone's on the same page, right? So that's the whole idea by getting these things down and working through this process and understanding where these issues overlap with yours and these values overlap with yours and being able to kind of move that. It's a process, right? So it's not something you're gonna do in one day. It's gonna take a little time to kind of get it done. But it's about you gotta do it, right? And the thing about, especially the thing about elevator pitches, we're gonna practice a little bit here too, and you'll do more when you do the field work, is that, you have to think about it as you're talking, right? So you can write something that's brilliant, but try to spit it out.
Yeah,
right? So you have to write like you talk, and you have to, because that's how it's gonna come across. But it doesn't mean you can't use values and you can't talk about things, right? About issues. It just means, and that's why when you practice with someone and they hear it, they're gonna go like, right? But someone you trust, but like that's what's gonna help too.
Even if you like bullet point, is that, because some people do differently, like just like, I don't write complete sentences all the time, I just like,
Is that how you talk?
Yeah.
But no, but I'm saying,
He's saying write it like you.
right. So it's like if you say like, this is what I believe in, and I think we need this, and I think we need this, and I think we need this. Right. No, but like I mean, that seems like that's how you talk, right? So it's like, so that's how it should sound. That's all I'm saying, right? So it's like, because how I would do it might not be that, but that's me, right?
You're right.
I need to be comfortable in how I talk to someone, look at someone, and the values. How I'm gonna work those values out. And as you learn and feel, some of the stuff is going to be a little on the fly. So the more practice you are on all of these things, the better it's going to come across. Because it's not like you're stumbling, and you're actually able to then concentrate on the listening part, right? Because I said at the beginning, like communications, lesson 1 is listening, right? It's not talking it's listening. Like if you're not listening, communication is already broken down. Right? So you have to sort of absorb that, and that's where it comes important at the doors or anywhere you're talking. One-on-one doesn't matter. But in those one-on-one spaces, like hearing that allows you to then feel like, where is this story going, and then how do I sort of stitch this stuff together? So, anyway, you keep writing for a minute, it's fine. No, you're fine, we're good. We started a few minutes late, so I'm trying to get us out on time if I can, but I might take a couple minutes just because they do want to run through just a couple of other little basic stuff that's outside this. But this is the important part. Like, it's the writing and it's the speaking part that I think is good. So I want to use chunk of time for that. So who wants to start?
How long would you say an elevator pitch?
So I usually go for like these little values ones. I try to make them like, you're talking like 100 words. It could be less. I mean, it could be 50. I mean, you're talking as like, if you're on the door, like you don't have time to make a speech.
Right.
Right? You're not making a campaign kickoff speech at the door, right? So I mean, that's the thing. So it's like, you want to say like, I'm Brad Peacock and, you know, I'm running for, you know, Bennington, whatever district, or like I'm running for local rep and, you know, I feel like our community, you know, has a lot of concerns about climate change and economic development, and I want to see our community really thrive, and I believe that we have the people here who can, like, you sort of like, you know, talk about like who like me like want or are invested in staying here and doing this work and bringing more people together to actually sort of make our community whole. I mean, like, you can just sort of like, I mean, it's kind of like ad lib, you know, but like with purpose, right? So that's the kind of thing. So because it's got to come from here. It's got to be like who you really believe you are, right? And who you want someone to believe you are, too. So because if you're just sort of coming across like going, you know, I'm here to tell you that, like, you know, we can fix climate change in 5 years if we all just like stop eating, like, you know, like. So if you come in like with that stuff, like that's like, shoo, you've lost it. But if you come in and you're talking about the stuff that you already know that they probably care about, then you start to at least, you know, they might not always agree right off, but then you might have to pivot, but at least you give a little bit of an opening to set kind of a tone. If that makes sense. Who wants to try? It's all good.
Well, as the person who doesn't run for an office, I'll start.
What are you running for, Jim?
Garbage collector. Hey, my name's Jim and I'm running for select board. And I'm running on incarceration alternatives and reintegration to society. This is important because the folks we lock up, even for nonviolent crimes, are given a life sentence of marginalization. By instead providing structure and a chance for inclusion, we keep our communities safer and more vibrant. So that's why I don't run for office. By offering reintegration, we retrain family structure and support. This is the benefit of all of us, and this really is. For the person we lock away today, they're going to be our neighbor tomorrow. Do we want this person to be thriving, or do we want this person to be left behind?
See? Very good. Very good. Very good. Yeah. See what I think in having those sort of, that value right there is like, that's basically it. Like you want, like that's what people want to hear. Right? It's like, I mean, even like the policy stuff, like it's fine. I mean, like it wasn't heavy on policy, so it was good. Like, yeah, it's like, you know, the person we lock up today is our neighbor tomorrow. I mean, and they were probably our neighbor yesterday.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, you're still our neighbor. You just happen to be living somewhere else. Yeah. It's good. Floors, we can just go around.
Yeah.
It's easier when it's that.
That's a good idea.
That was you.
That would be me, he's not running for anything, thank God. You will say? Okay. And they didn't know what I was running for, so I didn't put it in. So, I'm Mary Parrish, and I'm here today because I know that you, like everybody else in Bennington, really wants us to be a thriving community. And I really need your help in accomplishing that. Whether it has to do with a healthy community, or healthy workers, or our environment and our people in. So will you please help me? I know, short.
Good, yeah. Short's good.
So I have two of them, because I have one that I wrote this morning. This morning. And then I have the one that I just wrote. And there's some good differences to it, because I think the first one is definitely more of like the what is the like what am I anticipating the negatives to be, and working within that framework. And so for me, I was born in California. I have no control over that, but but now I went to Bennington College as well. And you know, I think sometimes when I'm introducing myself, even as a business owner, it's almost like, wait, oh, this is so great, nice to meet you. And then it's like, but you're not from around here, are you? So there's definitely that kind of thing to it. So, and being young kind of had a lot more of putting on experience, you know, trying to talk up what experience. And then the second one is kind of more value thing. So first one, my name is Dane Whitman, and I would love to work for Vermont and represent Bennington in the state legislature. Most people in Bennington agree that we have some real problems to solve, and I'm prepared to dedicate everything I've got to working on those problems. I'll work to revitalize the youth workforce, jumpstart our economy through environmental entrepreneurship, provide support for struggling families, and advocate for residents impacted by the PFOA water crisis. In my past 7 years in Bennington, I started a landscape and garden design business, represented the interests of the town of Bennington for the PFOA water lines, and spearheaded environmental sustainability initiatives for Bennington College. Bennington for me is more than a home, but a community of people who care, who are informed, and who deserve nothing but the best. I hope to meet the challenge.
Yeah.
And then the second one is, my name is Dane Whitman. I'm a business owner and entrepreneur. I believe strongly that the best work comes through collaborative, generous, and friendly experiences. I believe that Bennington can become energized by engaging in the opportunities available to mobilize our community around common goals. I believe that by caring for one another, connecting, and enabling each other to reach our full potentials, we can improve everybody's quality of life, find new partners and allies by making Vermont a welcoming community, and encouraging accountability for everybody.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, that's very good.
That was a good contrast. Thanks for doing that. I mean,
Yeah, that was good.
That was good, actually. I mean, that was, you know, it's good to sort of see what happens in isolation when,
And then
not that
what-
like training's like everything, but it's like, but sort of like how we sort of talk about this stuff and like
Yeah.
how we migrate away from those
Yeah.
words like that. So yeah, great.
So my name is Brad Peacock, and as a farmer and candidate, climate change is on the forefront of my mind daily. And I want to be a part of the change that is needed so that all our future generations can live in a world where we can still farm, drink the water, and enjoy our natural world. I'm a tireless advocate for equity and fairness within our communities, making sure that everyone has a chance to succeed no matter who you are or where you came from. I naturally gravitate towards efficiencies and taking a hard look at what is not working, and formulate a strategy and implement the changes needed to fix what is not. I have a mission to reconnect people to their neighbors, community, and nature so that we can unite in respectful ways to solve the issues we are facing and move forward together.
Nice.
Very good. Thank you.
Lisa, you're over there, but there.
I didn't sneak out.
You didn't, okay.
Want me to go before you?
No,
Okay,
okay,
go
that's all done. Hi, I'm Lisa Carton. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been in private practice over 30 years helping people to get unstuck. And I think we all can recognize that Bennington has struggled for a lot of years, actually, and with different ways that we were blocked. And I'm running for select board because I believe that we're in a really good position right now to identify some of those blockages and actually start to let them go so we can all benefit and prosper. And I'm actually here to ask you to support me, but also because I want to hear what you think the blockages are, because we need to identify them clearly first, and then I believe very strongly we can all work together and release some of those so we're all happier, and especially our kids deserve more opportunities. Blah, blah,
Yay.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
We get Tom back there.
Well, Tom, do you have one?
I'll read it, it's not done, but I'll read what I have.
In front of that camera now.
We're all
I'll edit as I go. I'm Tom, I'm a Bennington native. I like to help people help people. I like to work collaboratively to generate new ideas and help folks find ways to implement them. I believe that it's only by working together that we'll create the kind of society we all want, a thriving, welcoming community where people can pursue their dreams while we meet the challenges of a changing economy, where we can drink the water and water our gardens without worry. That's as far as I got.
Yay.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Tom. Sean.
My name is Sean Pratt, and I'm running for school board. I am a community advocate. I help people thrive economically and socially. I want to be able to help people feel safe, feel like they're understood. I want to be able to help people understand, people feel supported and understood, and I want to be there to help others in the community and be there for all people's diverse backgrounds.
Yay.
I can do better.
Yay.
Yeah, no, but like, that was a great start. I mean, like,
Yeah.
yeah, start. We all have to start somewhere, right? I mean, trust me. Like, this stuff takes practice, right? This is a process that takes practice. You're going to do this more than once, right? So I'll tell you right now, nobody spits one out in perfection. It's always a work in progress because every person you come across is a little bit different, and so it's like, because we all are. And so like, how we hear things and how we have conversations, like we're going to be shifting. And the more you do it, the more it just becomes like you. Because it is you, right? So it's like, but it's how you talk about your worldview and how you frame it. It's like, that's the important part, right? So that's what you did, right? So I think like that's where, and then you'll just get this down to like, it's second nature. I mean, I always like to point, everyone likes to point to Bernie, but like, he's been saying the same thing for 40 years. Well, yeah, he has, right? And, and for him it's worked, right? But like, but it's consistent, and he has had a consistent message because it's a consistent value set for him, right? So all I'm saying is like, not that we're all going to be Bernie, but you are going to have, your value sets are yours and they're going to be communicated, and you just stay true to them. And that's what people forget, because they feel like they have to bend to reach somebody. And the fact is, it's the other way around. Like, people need to bend to our values, because our values are actually shared ones, and we have more to share with that space. So,
And he had them all written here.
yeah.
It's a matter of the,
And I ain't gonna say nothing. I'm gonna be honest. I think that's right.
That's right.
You just gotta come out with the flow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did you have something to share?
My turn?
Yeah.
okay. So I kind of have it like in 3 different things. It's not going to be, again, so my name is Mia. I'm not particularly ready for anything, but I did have a question before I started to see how it is that, like, so he was running for school board, but we're talking about these, like, general things and not anything specific to that.
Right.
To that campaign. So that's kind of how I'm going, because I'm not running for anything, but I am also a community advocate, and I listen to people. I've noticed in Bennington that there's a disconnect between groups of people who actually have commonality in their pain and their trauma, and we need to regroup as a community. I strongly believe in regrouping to find our commonality so that we can work on pathways to equity for all of us. I believe that we can develop an empathetic, compassionate community that thrives together.
Yay. Yay.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You sure? You sure you're not running? No. You got time for one more. You got time for one more.
Okay, I focused a little more on one issue because I thought that's what I heard. But, and I also didn't do an intro, and I'm not running anything. But I'm Jill, recent transplant to Bennington. I'm really excited about the future of our community. I think one way to guarantee a positive future is to increase our economic opportunities for both our current neighbors and our future neighbors. We can achieve this one way by providing paid family leave and universal childcare so that working families can thrive. Once we have those bare minimum supports in place, folks can then set their sights higher and be able to further contribute to our community in order to make it a vibrant, safe, and happy place.
Nice.
Sure. Again, are you sure these folks aren't running? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we got it. Like,
More time.
Point yourself.
Right there.
Point yourself.
Everyone points yourself. Exactly. Good. So thank you. So that's where it all starts, right? So it just starts like, this is like basic ground. Like, you just got to be able to talk about the things that, these values that you believe in. Like, don't think that other values are better than yours, right? So like, these shared values that we talked about, like, these are our values, so we should be unafraid and unequivocal about sharing them and about speaking them out loud, right? Because we too often think that there's this game to be played that's not true, right? That game was set up so we fail, right? Because that game is rigged. This one's not. This one isn't. We set the rules in this one. You have to do that. So anyway, so the elevator pitch exercise is there to framework. You know, if you ever have questions, you feel free to contact me about it. And then, so real quick, because I know Emily talked about this a little bit, and it can be a whole other session. But like, so basically, what I try to talk about with this communication stuff is really like all these things that you're going to do, right? You know, the messaging, once it's there, like the rest of it, it's just ways of, it's just it's like almost like mechanics. It's just like how you get things out, right? So if you're comfortable on social media, then you should do what's comfortable for you. If you're not comfortable, then find someone on your team who is, and if they're able to, and they're on the same page as you, you can delegate that out pretty easily, right? Because the idea is really you should be pretty much everywhere. Right? And so these values and these communications you do, they should be on your flyers, they should be on postcards, they should be on your email, they should be on your website. If you're on Front Porch Forum, if you're doing stuff, I don't care if you're on Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, it doesn't matter. Wherever you are saying it, it should be this, what you just said, right? It shouldn't be anything different. The audience is different, but your values shouldn't be. So the other thing I would tell people, especially for social media, because people always sort of like, oh my God, I announced yesterday I should I should build up followers of that. Man, I will tell you right now, if that's your thought, like give it up, right? Because I used to work with authors, you're like going, well, I've never really had a Twitter account, and there's books about to be published, should I start one? I'm like, no. Because like, you're gonna spend more time doing that than the things you're actually gonna need to be doing. So if you're thinking about doing it, like you should have it, so if you wanna be and that's a space you're gonna be in, then you should be in it now, right? And you should be following people and checking and sort of understand how those people you're gonna reach are communicating so you're comfortable with it, right? So it's like, you can't do it, you know, but then you should also learn how to do the basics of a lot of this stuff. That's something Emily didn't talk about a lot, but like, unless you have a good long-term volunteer or best friend who can like update your website and like post things on Facebook for you, for the most part, if you talk to candidates post-election, like, yeah, they're doing it, right? So you gotta know how to do some of that stuff. I would just sort of say like, learn some of those basics. Basic WordPress, Wix site, whatever you wanna do, something really simple. Post to Facebook, that kind of thing. And then, you know, and for the unfamiliar stuff, I mean, I really I always stress to people, if you have someone on your team who wants to help you do something for the campaign, do it, but realize if it doesn't happen after that, it just goes kind of dormant. So it's like, you have to understand, like, things you're willing to keep up, then stick with that sort of window. And that's sort of just my general sort of approach for social media stuff. But anyway, that's all there. And this, to me, is like what I want people to walk away with. If it's anything more that we've talked about, and I've kind of said this, but not maybe explicitly, is that the more you frame your campaign and you, the less others do it for you. Right? Because that's the core thing. We need to be framing and sort of communicating our values, not the other way around. So, went over. I don't want to cut into your break too much and to feel that.
Thank you, Jay.
Anyway, thank you very much.